There seem to be two major crises in this country right now: racism and the ongoing catastrophe of a generation of kids who can't get back to school. Who better to talk to about both of these escalating problems than head teacher, educator and author Katharine Birbalsingh. Hello, Katharine.
Hi there.
How can we get our kids back to school?
Well, right now we see this as an opportunity. I mean, school is open for us, except we only have a small number of year 10s and 12s in on any one day, and we're following the guidelines from the council. But if we were all doing that, then I think it would do a lot to make people feel more at ease, so that in September, I'm hoping the whole school can come back. I mean, that's what I'd like to achieve. Because when you open up your school in a small way, everyone just gets more used to being in school, and it's not, people aren't so scared. That's families, children, and teachers, you know?
Yeah. Why did schools get so mired in this kind of paranoia thing? Why are, we all know that you've got a very, very, very tiny chance of dying from coronavirus if you're a kid, that basically the schools are safe to go back to. How come the kids haven't gone back already?
Yeah, well, you say we all know. I don't think everyone does know that. I think it would be really good to have some stats. I read this morning, for instance, you're far more likely to die if you're under 15 of being hit by lightning.
Yeah, that's a favourite.
Of COVID, you know. But the stats with the numbers, I'm unable right now to reel them off to you because I haven't heard them enough. And that's me, let alone our families and the teachers and other teachers and so on. So, the fact is that it should be just common knowledge, and it isn't common knowledge. And it tends to be the case that you'll know of someone, at least know of someone who might have died, or someone who knows someone who died. And when the television and the radio and everybody's talking about it, it just turns into this terrifying thing. And you think that the only way you can stay safe is if you stay at home. And of course, that's what government wanted people to do during lockdown, was to stay at home. And I think everyone has been so terrified by that that they think that they must never leave home again. And obviously, the country cannot continue in that fashion.
Can you reflect on, I'm not blaming you personally, and perhaps there's no way around this situation, but it does feel to me, and I think a lot of people, like a whole generation of kids are being let down. They're losing the best part of a year's education. How does that worry you?
Yes, enormously. And we have found that, and my teachers have done an amazing job of, as I know in many schools this will be the case, where we've done video lessons, we've done Zoom lessons, we've done Google Classroom with work coming in and so on. And the kids, 90% of our have done the work. Those same children have then come into school, and we find they haven't retained anything. And the reason, and these are the kids who are working, let alone the kids who aren't working, right? So there's a whole bunch of kids out in the country who aren't doing any work. But even the kids who are working aren't retaining the information, because what being in school does is it allows the teacher to hold the child accountable. And they're able to check for understanding, which you simply cannot do on a Zoom lesson or through a video lesson. And you're also not able to do spaced repetition. You're not able to return to later and get them to retrieve it from their memories. And that's something that a good teacher does without even realizing that she's doing it. And the fact is we can't do that through technology. We can't. If ever there's been a time for it to be proved that technology cannot replace a good school or a good teacher, this is it. We need children in school.
Now, you're currently head teacher of an independent school, I think.
No. We're in an inner city school with a typical inner city intake. It's a free school, but I mean...
That's what I meant. Sorry, I got the terminology wrong. But
yes.
you taught at 5 different state schools, and you said that having done that, it convinced you beyond a shadow of a doubt that the system is broken because it keeps poor children poor. Explain that.
2010. Yeah, that was in 2010. So the system, I think it's much better now than it was, I should say, and I think we are winning. And when I say we are winning, I mean those people in the system who are traditionalists, who believe in the teacher being in charge and leading the learning from the front. Too often these days in the 21st century, parents and teachers want to be friends with their children, as opposed to what you want is admiration and respect from a child. You don't want to be matey with them, because otherwise they lose respect for you, and then they don't do what you want them to do, which is to do that maths when they find it difficult. So.
And I think Katharine, you said once, and it's a fascinating quote, that it isn't the teacher's job to teach children skills; it's to impart knowledge.
That's right, and the skills will come along. People, sadly, we think to ourselves, in order for them to be creative or independently minded, we need to just let them be free to do whatever they want. When actually the opposite is true. It's when you restrict, it doesn't see intuitively. You think, how does it? No, when you restrict their freedom, and that means making sure that they get their homework done, making sure that you drill the times tables and so on. Once you pack their heads full of knowledge, they then have something to think about and to be independently minded about and to be creative with. If they don't know very much, then they can't be creative. And that is a mistake that we've made regularly, I'd say, over the last 30 or 40 years, because in the 60s and 70s, there was a bit of a revolution in education. Things changed enormously, for the worse, I would say. But I would say in the last 10 years, things have been, we've been pulling it back towards the traditional way. So at Michaela, you will find desks in rows facing the teacher. The teacher is...
What is it? Sorry, Katharine, what's your school again? To explain, where is it? It's called
It's called Michaela, and it's in Wembley Park. Okay. It's in the city school. And we have a challenging intake with the normal inner city intake, and yet we've been getting 90% of our kids to do work over the lockdown period, for instance. Or
do you ban mobile phones?
Yes, absolutely, of course. I mean, that goes without
of
saying.
course, you say that.
Well, yes, you're right. Lots of schools perhaps don't, and there is too much of a relaxed atmosphere in schools, and I think now more than ever, schools really need to pull it together to have very high standards of behavior and be super efficient with their time. Because in September, when I hope all schools will be back, we need to be catching up on the mislearning that's happened over the last few months. Yeah.
You also lamented the fact that a lot of kids, when they get in trouble or to avoid trouble in the inner city areas and around the country, I guess, they play the race card. Explain that.
Yeah, well, it's not so much playing the race card. Kids will play any card. So they'll say, it wasn't me. I mean, that's what kids do. You think back to when you were a kid. You do something wrong, and then you say, well, I didn't do that. I don't know, he did it. Oh, I didn't. So you use any possible excuse to be able to get out of something. And a clever parent or a clever teacher is able to go, no, I saw you, and I'm holding you to account. And holding children to account isn't mean. We often think to ourselves, oh, you're mean if you give detentions, or you get off on it. People think, oh, you just love being authoritarian and you want to impose your will on children. I mean, that's silly. It's when you love children that you hold them to account, because you know that you want them to make something of themselves. And children depend on us. They depend on us to follow through and to hold them to account so that they end up learning in the end. Because if you don't and you just let them go free, well, they'll just be playing video games all day. I mean, they're kids. I'll
tell you what, Katharine, if I had kids, I'd send them to your school. Can we just, before we go, discuss our current crisis to do with racism in this country? What is your take on what's going on? Some people have described these protests as the kind of Me Too movement of racism. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, I mean, I'm not sure what they mean by that. I mean, I would say that, of course, there is racism. And I mean, I could talk about the fact that in the top 100 FTSE companies, there isn't a single black CEO. I could give you a whole variety of examples of things that we might want to talk about. But we're not talking about those things, right? Instead, people are putting black boxes on Instagram. I don't understand how that helps anybody. I've spent my entire life working with young black people in the inner city. That makes a difference, but that requires 25 years of commitment. Most people don't want to do that. They want to say, they just want a tick to be able to say, look, I'm a non-racist. I put a black box up on Instagram.
Would you agree that these? I mean, I think most of the Black Lives Matter protesters are doing it for decent reasons, but it's a fundamental protest against what they perceive as institutional racism around this country. Do you think that's justified?
Well, as I say, I think there is racism. I can't tell you how much or what type. I mean, it's hard for me to say. But what I would say is that in order for us to improve as a society, which, let's frank it, is pretty amazing, compare Britain to any country in the world. We're an amazing country. I mean, when it comes to race, there's nowhere else in Europe I would want to live. I mean, and for many other reasons, I love this country. And the very fact that we can have these protests just demonstrates how open-minded we are, right?
It does.
Now, having said that, of course we want to get better. But we don't get better by beating people over the head and calling them all racist. That's crazy.
Yes.
You get better by talking about the issues. And we're not talking about the fact that if you send a CV in and you have a black name instead of a white name, you're less likely to get shortlisted.
Katharine, I absolutely agree with you 100%. We're running out of time. Thank you so much for your time. Let's talk again soon. A very interesting lady there.